750 or higher. Well, not a lot of people have a 750 credit score. And those people who do are very proud of the fact that they have a high credit score, right? But a lot of people are at 720 or 700 or 690 or stuff like that. They're not going to get 4%. They're going to get 4 1/4, okay? 4 and a little more. So I actually ask people, like, tell me where your cash is. That's the first thing that's important. Like, once you've established that they've got some money and whatnot, you say, may I ask you, is your cash in a checking or savings account in your name? That's the question, right? And then you establish that, and now you can have the conversations that we've been talking about, right? And now you can also have a conversation about how do you want to borrow this money? And let's take a look at what a 15-year mortgage would cost you, because you'd save so much. And you take a 30-year mortgage, but you make the 15-year payment. It's a very cool technique if people can afford it, right? To do that, because what if you lose your job one day? Now you're not tied into the 15-year payment amount. That was just self-imposed. You can actually go back to the 30-year payment amount and have a little break in your monthly expenses should you need it. So that's always a cool way to talk to people about that. Yeah. Okay. Something I wanted to cover today that we haven't talked about before is counter offers. So counter offers is, let's say you submitted an offer for Betty, and it wasn't an asking price, and the seller comes back and says, no, I want something else. So I don't want to be in the Realtors Association. The moment I see that this list is really short, something's wrong. I'm in the wrong library. So I need to go back to the Hawaii Association of Realtors library, which is all of our documents, right? Just to remind you that there's libraries up here. All right, so I'm looking for the counteroffer form, and there are 3 counteroffer forms. They're all the same. They're all blank. Okay, you want to hit that? Let's hit this.
It's on there.
Oh, it's on? I guess we did get turned on. All right. So you got a counteroffer. This doesn't matter. You got a counteroffer at let's say you made an offer at $380,000, right? So this is the offer. And you said you wanted the seller to do the termite inspection report, and the seller was supposed to provide the documents, and that's it. That's it. And the seller comes back and sends you a counter. That would be counter number 1, and says 400 and no termite. That's what the counteroffer says. I'm not paying for a termite report. And you go, okay, what would you like to do? And your buyer says, well, I don't want to pay $400,000 for that unit. I don't want to accept that. What can we do? What could you do? What could you offer?
$390.
You could write a counteroffer that says $390.
And yes, termites.
And yes, termites. So now how do you do that? So the first counteroffer that came from the seller was down here. See, it's a 2-page form, yeah? And we're just gonna go right to the bottom here. And the first thing it says, is there any change in agency disclosure? And we're gonna put NC for no change. And then the next one says, is there any change to the earnest money deposit? We go, no change to the earnest money deposit. Then our earnest money deposit, I'm just gonna make it up, was $5,000. And the next one was $5,000. And in here, I'm gonna put the comment, no change. Right? Wherever there's no change, I'm putting no change, except on the money thing. If I'm changing the money, I have to re-enter it to make it work. But over here, I can say no change. Over here, I can say no change, right? And I'm now going to bring in, how much is she bringing in? $50,000 total, so she's bringing in another 40. And now, we want to make our offer at $390, or this is the seller. So the seller says, bring me a $350,000 loan. Right? That's what the seller said. And then the seller went up here and said, no change to the addenda. And yes, I have an additional item here. And the first item the seller said is number 1, termite inspection, colon, delete. That's all he has to say. He doesn't have to say, oh, the seller does not wish to do a termite inspection, or termite inspection, remove, or not to be done, or whatever. The easiest way is because this is referring to a contract. A counter offer gets attached to the contract. It's like an addendum, right? And so it's going to refer to an item and say, delete that. It would be even better if you named the actual paragraph. So what's the paragraph? So it would be reference, what is that, K? No, K is, it's L-1. Termite inspection, delete. Right? In other words, refer to the actual paragraph in the contract, name it, because the buyer and seller don't know what the name of these things are. So always name it, and then simply say delete. Isn't that interesting? So now, everybody get that?
Yeah.
That's all that needs to be done. So now Betty's gonna come back, and Betty's submitting an offer. Now how can you tell one counter offer from the next counter offer? Well, you tell by the date, the counter offer reference date, and right here it says whether the buyer or seller has submitted it. And sometimes you have to go and pay real close attention because they fly fast and furious, right? They go back and forth, and sometimes that happens pretty quickly.
Within the same day, too?
Yes. So sometimes when it's within the same day, the only way you can tell it apart is this one from the buyer or is this one from the seller? So, and whose turn is it, right? Where are we at? The most important thing to keep in mind here is when you get a new counter offer, the old counter offer dies, goes away. So I literally, when I print them out, because I have a file folder going with all my contracts, right, so I can read it easily, I fold them in half, cross them out, fold it in half, and put it in the back of my file folder so that I don't somehow mistakenly pick that one up because it no longer exists. Now I might need it because I'm not letting you delete this or some other item that's written in there. I want that, so we're going to try it again with a higher price or whatever, right? So I might pick up my wording again, but I've got to be sure that that's no longer the valid counteroffer. The valid counteroffer is now this one. And now we're going to respond to this one.
So in essence, you're, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
You don't have to copy everything onto the new offer then?
The only thing, that's a great question. So let's say that there are 3 items here. It's easier to talk about a house than it is a condo because there's not many things on a condo often that are changed. So you could put 2 and you go survey and it's called delete, right? Seller refuses to do a survey. And then the third one says 3, seller agrees to repair the kitchen cabinet. there was some kitchen cabinet repair required, right? So now you've got these three things that are being negotiated, right? So as the buyer, you can now come back and say, well, what do I want? So what do I do in order to keep this straight? I print this out, and I have a yellow highlighter and a black pen. And the things that my buyer agrees to that I need to carry forward into the next counteroffer, I highlight in yellow. Because now all I have to do is just copy them over, right? The things that my buyer doesn't want, I cross out in black or change somehow, right? Maybe yellow and some writing, because we're gonna modify it. So like we could say, yes, there will be a termite inspection and seller agrees to pay $200, as opposed to it might cost $450 or something, right? Or survey, whatever. So you could try to negotiate that they split the cost, right? You might do that. So I'm gonna print this out, and I'm going to, as I talk to my client, make notes to myself with yellow highlighter or black to figure out what do I have to do now to counter this. So we could now counter this by going, okay, no, we're not paying $400, we're only going to pay $340 in the loan, right? And that's gonna take it to $390. So that's our counter offer. Our counter offer here is, okay, we'll pay for the termite inspection, however, the remainder of the termite provision shall apply. So I might termite inspection, delete the inspection. In other words, the inspection is not the seller's responsibility. However, the remainder of the termite provision, which talks about remediation, I want to make sure we're not deleting the entire termite provision. See that? So the seller's saying, I don't want to pay for an inspection. Okay, fine, but it's the remediation that's expensive. Even when those guys come in with the tanks and they do a little spot treatment, horrendously expensive. I just had one done, it was $1,200 just for a few spots. You'd just be surprised how expensive that is. So you want to make sure that remains the seller's responsibility, for instance. And then we have here survey, and we can go back and say buyer and seller to split the cost of the survey. And seller agrees to repair the kitchen cabinet, I agree with that. Or if we say the survey, the seller wanted to delete it, and he said delete, and our counter offer simply takes that out. In other words, we don't agree, you gotta do me a survey. I'm not buying this without a survey. Because the survey is requested in the contract.
Yeah.
The counter offer said take it out, and by simply eliminating its mention in the counter offer, the contract applies. The contract paragraph hasn't been modified. So you don't need to go here and say, no, survey shall remain. You simply remove any mention of the survey because the contract is what's prevailing. So you always have to read this in conjunction with what the contract says. That's what it's modifying. So counteroffers can be confusing and a little disconcerting for that reason. So just stay in close touch with your broker and it requires a broker signature. So, but it's an important element. We do a lot of, I would say the majority of transactions have counteroffers. So you will definitely run into it. Okay?
So again, delete the termite is for when you're saying, no, we want it. Or it's saying, no, we agree to delete it.
No, if it appears here,
If
and it says delete, you are deleting it out of
You're
the,
agreeing to not do, you're agreeing that the buyer's gonna pay for it.
the buyer can, you're deleting the seller's responsibility to do
Okay.
anything about it.
Taking it
That's
out of the
correct.
contract.
Got it.
You're
Right.
taking that inspection out of the contract, but the remaining remainder of the provision remains.
Right.
Right, so that's what you want to be sure that the seller isn't deleting the remainder of the provision, right? And a listing agent would be smart enough to say, you know, the entire termite provision delete, right? That they delete everything, and then you can negotiate that. So, say, okay, we'll do the inspection, but no, you deal with that. It's like, same with survey. Sometimes we allow the seller to do a survey, but don't delete, what are we in now, L? I get them confused, K? No, survey is K. K3 is the provision of the survey that talks about what happens if there's an encroachment. So you leave K3 all filled in, and you only agree to delete K1, which is the survey. So, okay, fine. Buyer can do the survey, right? And you don't even need to say the buyer will do the survey. Buyer has a right to do that, right, as part of their inspections. But K3 still applies. If the buyer should find something, then the seller is obligated to fix it. Yeah. Cool, yeah. Okay. Any other questions came up for you? Okay, the next thing I wanted to say is that going forward, if I mentioned this already, whatever, I apologize, is the strategies classes at the Realtors Association are a nice thing to pursue in terms of your education. They happen every 4 months, meaning they just rotate, right? So they get repeated, but they're quite worthwhile. I'm not suggesting you leap into the contract class this week because you just did a contract class. So, but in 6 or 9 months or a year, I would highly recommend you take a contract class. It's just a really good thing to do. It's a 6-hour CE class, and boy, does it take you through the contract, right?
I had a question about that. And it uses the hard forms, not the global KW forms. Is that correct?
Of course.
Right. So if we were to do it, could we follow you through the procedure, the process, using our global form? Purchase contract.
You're just learning about the purchase contract. How you fill it out is discussed in the purchase contract because we talk about how to strategically fill out a contract to your client's benefit. So it goes beyond the pukas that are filled in for us here and talks about, that's fine that you have pre-filled pukas, but how do you make sure those pukas address your client's need? And if your client had a particular situation, how might you modify your contract to meet your client's situation?
I understand. I just was literally visualizing myself in the class tomorrow and knowing that you're going to be teaching it to people that aren't necessarily at KW. And if I could continue to do the way I'm going to do it and still follow through a long class, or if I'm going to run into a wall. It was just sort of a strategic
I think you're
question.
overthinking it again.
Again.
Yes. So I'm now getting to know you.
I don't wanna-
And I go, okay, we don't need to go there, Terry. It's not that
Yeah.
complicated.
Well, I'm trying to drive in behaviors. I want to just go to my forms, not to all forms to get a purchase contract, just so that I
Oh, it's not a zip forms class, it's a contract class.
okay.
It's not about zip forms. It's about reviewing each paragraph in the contract.
Got it.
Okay? And it's not about how to email it to people. It's all just about,
Okay.
so we actually get a hard copy and we go page by page and paragraph by paragraph
Okay.
through the hard copy.
Okay.
And then the conversation becomes, as I said, how do you strategically help a client this way or that way, you know, and fill out the pukas differently so as to be responsive to your client. Yeah. So that's a very helpful conversation because here you've got these pukas filled in and they're a guide, right? They're not meant to be static. They're meant to be there for you to modify. For instance, when you have a 30-day closing, some of those times don't work in our existing contract and you kind of have to think about that, you know, and how do you modify them? So just be aware of that. Yeah, so it's totally worthwhile. And I would encourage you to do that, or suggest you do that this week because you just had a 3-hour contract class. Do it in 6 or 9 months and and you'll get a lot more out of it. It also helps at this point to write more contracts and become familiar with what happens when a client says, oh, but, you know, I can't do this or I can't do that, right? So you'll learn the contract more just by practice at this point. What I do recommend is the finance classes coming up. They are in December, and you know, people go, man, do I really need finance classes? Well, they're really for realtors, right? They're about how to help us better communicate with our clients and have a better understanding of the financing system and what all these terms mean and stuff like that. And not much of what I've gone over in Essentials is covered in finance. It's quite different, so it's not repetitive.
Is that at RAM or that's here?
It's RAM. So I'm talking just about RAM classes at this point. They tend to be on our calendar, so we let you know that they're happening. But just so you know, you need to register with RAM and then go to RAM.
Are those CE? Sorry.
Yes, they're all the strategy classes are CE, and they're all free, though if you take them for CE, you have to pay the CE registration portion. And then after that is the, I believe the next one is a real estate licensee's responsibilities during escrow. That's not a CE class, that's not a strategies class. It is a CE class. I wrote it and I teach it. And it is, I have people walking out of there and say, why isn't this a required course? Required. So if you want a better understanding of what happens in escrow and what your job is in escrow, that is a really valuable class. The next module is the listing module. And the listing module starts with how to get a listing, and it talks a lot about listing presentation. The review of the contract is a portion of it, and then how to do a CMA. And it takes slightly different approach than what you've heard here. So at some point you might find it worthwhile just to take a look at what that perspective is and how they present that information. So there you go, that's available. And there's lots of other new courses being offered, right? Don't forget you have to take Core A and Core B. And I don't believe you have an ethics requirement because you're new. So, but you do have to take your Core A and Core B. And Core B won't be available until July next year. So everybody will be crunched to do their Core B from July to November, so just be aware of that. Okay. Great, awesome, okay. So now I wanted to just take us through a couple of things to remind you what's kind of next for you, right? And if you haven't already taken a look at doing your GPS or your 135, it really is worthwhile. Like you two you've got this awesome opportunity, and whether you're working alone or with somebody, to sit down and go, what is our big rocks, right? Remember that big rock conversation? What are our big rocks? What are we going to do to focus on this, right? For you guys, it's clearly your database and focusing on communicating with your database and getting that going. And everybody should have a database. Grow my database. How am I going to grow my database? And how am I communicating with my database? What's the second one? Are you focusing on open houses, right? Are you doing those? Are you going to do a farm? Do you have some money? Can you spend it on farming a certain geographic area? Do you have a kid in school that you can totally become the, volunteer lady at school?
More pressure.
Participating in groups and clubs can be incredibly impactful and effective. It's not going to get you a deal tomorrow, but it'll get you out there, right? So I love telling Miley Masada's story. Miley Masada is one of the brokers in charge at Coldwell Banker. And she started out with her kid in Makawao Elementary School. And she decided, oh my God, what can I do here? What can I do here? And she had a long vision in mind. It wasn't just, what can I do this month or this week, right? She goes, long term, how can I establish myself? So she went to the first grade teacher and she said, so what do you do for kids who did all their stuff right this week? She goes, well, we do stars. And I go, okay, great. I figured you'd do stars or something like that, right, on a board. So now, what do the kids get when they get 5 stars or whatever it is? And they go, well, nothing. They get 5 stars. And she goes, okay, so how about I bring ice cream on Friday afternoons and the kids who have 4 or 5 stars get ice cream. And the teachers loved it, absolutely loved it. So she started bringing the vat of ice cream and the cones and the scooper, and at 2 o'clock, just before school got out, she scooped out ice cream cones, and then it became everybody got an ice cream cone, or everybody wanted to get 5 stars so that they could get an ice cream cone, right? Totally. She does this week after week after week after week, and after a while, she's in the grocery store, and the kids go, Mommy, Mommy, there's the ice cream lady. And the parents come up to her and go, you're the one who's serving ice cream? Oh, that's awesome. Oh, yeah, I love it. It's so much fun. And yeah, if you ever want to come and help me, here's my card. Oh, you're a realtor. Yeah, I'm a realtor. I mean, it just allowed for this conversation and gave her access to everybody in the class, every parent in the class, in the multiple classes. It became a whole thing, right? How can you, she just made it up. She just created this for herself, right? By just going like, what would somebody need? How can I get in there? And it didn't happen overnight, but I'll tell you, within a couple of years, she owned Makawow for a while. She owned it. Okay, her sign was everywhere, right? So how awesome is that? So I share that as, that's a big rock. And it didn't take a lot of effort. Every Friday afternoon, she had to show up at 2 o'clock with her ice cream. That was it. It was an hour and a half of her time, and once a week, and she got it done. So being creative. I belong to 2 book clubs. I have done 3 transactions out of 2 book clubs. I have 8 people in one and 7 in the other. It's just like, and I don't talk about being a realtor in there. They all know I'm a realtor. There's another realtor in one of the clubs where I've done 2 transactions. It's like phenomenal, right? So just get out, just keep participating, keep expanding. What else could be a big rock? If you don't know a lot of people and you do want to do a farm, there's many ways to do a farm, right? So the idea is to do your 1, 3, 5 and come up with your 3 rocks. If you can't come up with 3, at least come up with 2 and focus on, well, how are we going to get there? And then at this morning's coaching call, we talked about what a 411 is and how to use a 411. So did I show you this already? Right, the 411 is this document over here that we can go to. And it takes our goal and it says, all right, this is my big goal, but now what am I supposed to do this month? So it'll let you set monthly goals. So this one says, okay, contact 200 people, finalize my listing presentation and practice it 3 times, finalize my buyer's packet presentation and practice it 3 times, and set up a 33 touch campaign. That's my goal for this month. So here I go, okay, now I know what to do this week. The first week I am going to finalize my listing presentation and do my 50 contacts, and that's it. So the beauty of what is on my must-do list this week. So when I sit down at my desk on Monday morning, all I have to do is go here and go, okay, I'm working just my listing presentation this week. Is it going to take me a week to put my listing presentation together? Probably. By the time I look at others and tweak it here and there and come up with another idea and then make it pretty and make it work for me and print it out. Yeah. And then I'm going to practice it, say it out loud, and I go, oh, I hate this. Right? This is what happens. And you go, I got to change it. So it's not just easy. Making a presentation that you're going to live with for a while is a big deal. Give yourself a week at least to do it. The next week would be develop a buyer's packet. And now I'm going to also have to get appointments to give my listing presentation. So I remind you that giving your listing presentation to friends counts. It's okay. Right? But get the appointments. And then it says, practice my listing presentation so that I can give it well. to my friends and acquaintances when I go out to practice it. So it's gonna take me a month to get that happening, but I'm reminded that this is what I set out to do for the month, right? This is what I set out to do for the month, and I've kind of spread it out. So this one is working on the buyer's packet, and this one is working on practicing a lot. And then this one is setting up my 33 touch. So I've spread out my goals, and then I might find that, oops, I didn't get it all done, right? So when you move this forward, if you didn't get it done, it's not crossed out. So I go, okay, I did my 50 contacts, and I finalized my listing presentation, and I developed a buyer's presentation, but I didn't practice my listing presentation 3 times. Oops, whatever. When you then move it forward, the items that are not crossed out are going to come into the next month. And I love that because it means that I don't lose track, right? It just carries it forward, and now all I have to do is redisperse it so that it works for the next month. And I have to add, okay, what are my goals for next month? What else is on my 135 that says I need to get accomplished in order to do this, right? So it's a really useful tool, and stays there for you. It's there. It doesn't go anywhere. You just log in.
Go to Italy.
Yeah, right? Go to Italy. I've got Portofino on my, I've never been to the Amalfi Coast, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait. I just want to sit there and be in awe.
Sure you get a house with one eye with a view.
Yes, absolutely, right? It's just like so, and like right now, I said, we were talking about what's good and what's happening to us, right? And this morning I got to say that on my vision board is a deck, an expanded deck. I have a deck that isn't big enough to really enjoy living outdoors. And I've always wanted a bigger deck, and the guy is starting today on my bigger deck. And it's just like, yay, it's so exciting. So I made it a priority, right? There's other things that I want, but I made it a priority, and by making it a priority over and over again, I talk about it at home, and I got my husband totally on board. Does he care? He doesn't give a hoot if we have a larger deck. I said, but I talked it up, and he bought into my dream. So, yeah. Okay, so that's our 411.
You did show us that.
Great, well, I'm glad to remind you, because it's a handy tool.
And that was in KW, not TLR.
That's correct, it's over here in my KW under resources. Great. So